Right, hello. This is my final presentation project I chose. For the topic I chose the biology of stress or the science behind stress. A little background why I chose this topic. Stress, I feel like, is something that we all, as college students as well as adults, can relate to. Those final feelings of stress we have, moments before taking a test or final season, just, oh, we gotta finish the semester. Anyway, moving on. So to start off my presentation, we have the question, what is stress? The scientific definition of stress I found is that stress is a bodily response to physical, mental, or emotional pressure that we experience. Um, it causes chemical changes in the body, specifically the brain, through releasing chemicals and hormones. And it can cause symptoms such as increased heart rate, blood pressure, things like that, and etc. Where do we experience that? We experience in the brain. On the next slide, we'll explore more where specifically. So inside the brain, where we first experience the process of stress and the chemical alterations of it is within a small little part of the brain called the amygdala. Please forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. All these anatomical word pronunciations are very difficult. Anyway, it is that little yellow portion of the brain right there. So just from there, that part of the brain is very heavily associated with kind of emotions and mood regulation, and it'll also where it houses our kind of our fear sensor of the brain, where we start to experience fear first and foremost, and it's the start of the fight or flight feelings. So from there, the hormones and the chemicals communicated will go through what is called the HPA axis system. Basically, it's a system for transporting kind of like hormones and information. H standing for hypothalamus, part of the brain, P for pituitary gland, and A for adrenal cortex. So the main chemical in question responsible for what we experience is called cortisol. And cortisol, very important, it's the main culprit behind what makes us feel stress when transported throughout the body. It will have us feel feelings of like adrenaline. It will kind of have our heart rate amped up, higher blood pressure, anything to help us deal with an emergency on hand. So this is a little cartoon I included to kind of explain why do we experience stress in this way, why did our bodies do this, and the answer for that is evolution. Our bodies evolved to do this. So the little cartoon I have, it has a little tiger with two kind of cavemen, Neanderthals, and you can see both of them stress, both representing a different response that stress can provide. One is kind of staying there, choosing to fight the tiger. It's feeling, I'm threatened, I need to protect myself, I'm going to fight this. This is a stress response. Whereas the other one, he's more scared than like stressed or threatened. So he's like, you can fight, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna leave. So his response is to leave. Either way, both of these are important responses to keep us alive and help a species thrive. Not only do we as humans experience fight or flight senses, animals experience this as well. One thing I find funny though is, yes, we experience this with life-threatening situations like an animal or maybe like a natural disaster, but we'll also experience the same thing as students when it comes to things like tests or preparing for finals or opening up the professor's message to see our grade. So problems of stress, while stress is a natural component of the body and the brain, too much of it can lead to very negative consequences, one being sort of brain matter degeneration. So too much long-term exposure or like production of cortisol in the brain, say if you're like constantly around stressful environments, or maybe your body has an irregularity where it's producing more cortisol than it should, can result in forms of brain matter degeneration. So there's two types of brain matter in the brain. You have gray matter, which is responsible for kind of like elevated thought, critical thinking, decision making, things like that. Then you also have white matter, a sort of white fatty tissue in the brain between different parts of it, that aid in the communication by speeding up the electrical signals that different parts of the brain use to communicate with each other. Now, another thing that can also happen, which is sort of in the way brain matter degeneration, is it affects the hippocampus. In the hippocampus, we have it's the main site for neurogenesis, to where sort of new brain cells are created because old cells die. You need new cells to be made. This is the main site where that happens. However, brain matter degeneration with cortisol and stress, it can almost reduce that entirely or almost halt it entirely as well, which is not very good. Increased long-term exposure to cortisol and stress can also have increased risk of diseases related to matter degeneration, brain matter specifically. You're more prone and susceptible to diseases of that nature in your brain. So things like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, you'll be more at risk for diseases like that. Not only that, besides the brain, there's also other parts of the body where you can experience higher risk of diseases as a result of stress. You can be prone to high blood pressure, you can be more prone to heart disease, such as like heart attacks. Not only that, it can also affect weight and as well, and maybe sleep as well, or not maybe, it does affect sleep. So it's fight or flight response, but it puts you much more at risk of other diseases by making you have these sort of predisposition that many of these diseases are like almost directly linked cause. I remember earlier in the semester we spoke about how things like weight can affect susceptibility to diseases, and one of the effects of increase of long-term stress is that you can gain weight, which would in turn put you at greater risk of other diseases. So how does knowing this benefit? How does knowing like, oh, this is how stress works in the brain, this is what cortisol does, how does this help us? Like, what can we learn from it? So we can learn to better regulate our stress, and there are natural ways to do that. While researching this topic interestedly, I found there's actually certain like food groups that can be sort of related to lowering cortisol and stress, things like a dairy and grain, but overall like a healthy diet, that kind of lifestyle actually helps to lower stress. Not only that, sleeping regularly, exercise, all of these things, even finding happy hobbies, these things help to lower stress and help us experience only the stress that we need to get through a situation, not long-term negative exposure to stress. One thing that we also can learn and can help us is, since we know that the main cause of stress, in the primary cause, is the hormone cortisol, if your body has a natural irregularity to where it produces more cortisol than normal, or maybe like, yes, you are around like prolonged stress, but it's not feasible to get rid of like this environmental stress, unfortunately, then we also have stress regulators in the form of cortisol blockers. Basically, these are little drugs that help limit the flow or production of cortisol you experience, so that you won't feel like chronic stress, rather you'll feel only what is more normal, at least ideally. This here is my bibliography of the topic. Overall, I actually really enjoyed this topic, understanding what makes us stress, how does it do it, and it was also kind of fun to see and debunk like all these different advice people give you, saying like, oh, you're stressed, go do this, go do that. Oh yeah, that doesn't work for me, it just works for you. But actually it was interesting to see like where in the body like different things were like, yeah, no, this is proven to help us reduce our stress, besides like drugs, if that's not the recourse deemed necessary for you in conjunction with the doctor. But things like diet, exercising, and as funny as it tells us, because we're college students that don't sleep, but yes, sleeping will help us with our stress. But yeah, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.